what's happening, everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. So before I get into this one, I just want to say something real quick. There's only one thing I hate more than movies I don't like, and that is movies I am very much anticipating that I end up disliking. So I've been keeping a pretty close eye on this one. This is my most anticipated film of this month. I've been excited for it ever since I caught the trailer of it and found out that it did deliver to its South by Southwest premiere to pretty good reviews from what I saw. And from what I saw in the trailers, it just looked like a pretty original, pretty well done horror film. It is also an Indian-based horror film based off of a childhood experience that the director had in India before moving to America. So that right there, with it being a debut horror film, with it being a horror film that got really good reviews upon its release, and with it being centered upon an experience that the director had as a child, I'm just gonna say I'm one person that childhood means an extremely great matter to me. It is an extremely crucial, very important, development age of someone's life, the most important actually. And so just from all these things going forward, with the trailer that I saw, I honestly couldn't fucking wait to see this one. But I hate to say it, guys, but I would say up until maybe midway through this movie, there wasn't anything that I really wanted to say about it. There's nothing that really stood out, so let's just get I say let's get the negatives out of the way first, but please, mind you, there's a lot of negatives, much more than there are positives. So what I will say, or what I can say, about the first half of the movie is that the pacing is very lukewarm. Everything that was being shown up to the midway point or so, everything was very basic, very copy and paste. We've seen all this stuff just a million times over. It was that thing where it was like, okay, horror movie moment here, high school moment here, family moment here, best friend falling out moment, or just some character cliche moment here. Just something that could make whatever this movie was, whatever this story was, go forward just with very basic and just very copy and paste elements throughout. I think what it was that there was no actual meat to anything in the movie. Nothing really stood out. Another big thing was that, so based off of what you would expect from this debut film, from it being from such a important matter of the director's childhood, and with a pretty solid story, which basically what was being teased was that the story centers on our main character, who is at an American high school, who pretty much shuts out her Indian heritage to fit in with everybody, and with doing that pretty much lets go of her former best friend, who is actually battling with a demon based off of Indian heritage. And in order to beat the demon, this main character has to go back to those roots to battle the demon and save her former best friend. That sounds about right. That sounds fine. It sounds appropriate enough and fitting enough for a refreshing take on, a horror theme. But what I will say is that, surprisingly, centering on the best friend and her former best friend, the one dealing with the demon, you don't really get any context to that. You don't get any build-up for it. You don't get any background to it. You have really nothing to go forward with. Again, it's just copy and paste cliches and just, blank movie moment here, blank movie moment there. For its mainer storyline, just nothing really touches on this, I would actually say, until, again, the middle way through the movie, which at that point we've already established that this is kind of a nothing movie. Again, nothing really stands out, nothing really happens, and by this point you just kind of don't care. You've already gotten this much into the movie that it feels like, even if the second half of this movie was miles times better, which one positive it actually is, which we'll get to, again, by that point you just kind of don't really care about it, and it just feels even more out of place. But really quickly, I do want to take a break from just kind of bashing on the movie and actually say something that was pretty positive, that was one of the more important things to me, which I would say that once the movie actually starts, but it's just honestly once the demon gets unleashed and you actually start to care about shit and you actually want to see the movie like improve, and you kind of give all the past bullshit a pass. We don't necessarily see new or original horror, but we do see fun horror as far as it just kind of making its way in unexpectedly based off of when it enters and how it enters. Also, I would say that aside from the horror that I'm talking about, things do just otherwise continue to just be a little bit empty and just kind of lukewarm and just basic and everything. But as the movie does go on, there is a plot point that kind of centers more on like the mystery idea that regardless of anything, I think just as a viewing would have kept my interest. Just with saying this, beside the horror, which I will also state isn't exactly consistent, everything else just feels, again, just dull and empty. Which I will say, touching more on the horror, when it is there, again, it does more or less continue to maintain that fun horror feel. The only problem is that I can actually just, honestly, I think, count the amount of times, like the amount of scares in this film with just one hand, just with my fingers. And that is not just based off of like my opinion if it scared me or how well I thought it was executed. That is just in general, just as far as horror tropes or horror moments in a horror movie, any horror movie, there's just not that many of them. Now, as I was saying earlier, the second half is much better, and I'm going to talk about that now. There is a plot point where the movie just in general does pick up with its scares, with its story, with its pacing, its characters, and it's around the time where the main character's teacher becomes a lot more relevant to the story. And without spoiling anything, with just how much I actually just really didn't like the first half of this movie, I would actually go as far as to say that if the first half of the movie was as good as this last half, it might have been okay, but was saying that with the exception of the overall finale, which I will say does have some pretty okay effects to it that not only just stood out to me as a horror film or like as what the effects were based off of, but just as a debut indie horror film, it was just something there where it just made me accept and really respect the latter half of this movie much more, and it just makes you feel like maybe just because of how much better it was in the original half. Knowing this now, maybe if I rewatch the movie, I could actually pick things up more and actually care more and actually learn more. But also, lastly, speaking on this finale, it also just made me want to feel the death that it was clearly aiming at, but overall, just it did kind of ultimately flop in its execution, and it just by the end did feel a little bit underwhelming as well. It's just kind of dull and empty. Nothing that interesting happens, nothing stands out. There's just no actual meat to anything in this movie. Overall, I'm gonna give It Lives Inside a strong negative to mixed review. So that is my overall review on It Lives Inside. I don't see myself ever watching this one again, even with saying that the second half is much better, and it does kind of make me want to go back and look things up, like just rewatch things and maybe get a better like idea of everything. It's honestly just overall not enough to make me go back and sit through the bore that the first half was. So yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of It Lives Inside. Let me know what you guys thought about this movie. Again, it did get some pretty good reviews upon its release, but as it's been out, I have seen more and more criticism of it, and I just don't think that this one really stood out to me whatsoever. But with all that being said, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie as well as the review down in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.